Hi everybody and welcome to episode 6 of Beardychiel's Knitting Banter. I'm Beardychiel, otherwise known as John Glenn, and I'll be your presenter for all of these podcasts. And welcome to my world of knitting, life and other bits and pieces. What can I tell you? Welcome to any existing viewers and a massive welcome to any new viewers. It's lovely to have you with us. I hope you thoroughly enjoy the podcast. If you do, feel free to leave us a thumbs up. And if you really enjoy it and think you would like to see more but don't want to miss it, you can hit the subscribe button on YouTube and that'll make sure you get a little notification when I get off my behind and do the next piece of recording. As I say, my name is John Glenn, known as Beardychiel, and you will find me as Beardychiel on Instagram, on Ravelry and on Twitter. If you're looking for me on email, it's beardychiel@gmail.com, all of which, as I've been speaking, have been appearing around the screen in bits and pieces, so feel free to use them. And that's us. Off we go and into the podcast. It's been 3 weeks since the last one. So what's been happening in the 3 weeks? Well, some knitting, some time away from home. The local school holiday season has hit locally, so some extra time with my favourite podcast assistant Ian, who is now back at school today, so I have peace and tranquility to podcast. I normally start my podcast with a short summary of what's going to be included in this particular episode. Ignore the twittering in the background, it's just my tablet updating one or two pieces of software. What am I have put in? I've got a little bit on my local area, works in progress, completed objects. This last weekend was an exciting weekend, so I'll tell you about that. A tiny little bit of yarn acquisition. Some news in the local press, and the result of the last yarn competition giveaway. So all of that to come, and I hope you enjoy it. So what have I got for you? In my local area, we are really privileged in Caithness to have an incredible local history. Well, local history goes back, hey up, the sun's just come out, I'm watching my face bleaching out on one side and going black on the other. I suppose I could always turn into the sun and try and look distinguished, but that's a waste of time. You'll just have to live with it. As I was saying, local area, excellent local history. We have a lot of Viking history in the local area, having been an area which was visited in inverted commas. He hates the flying inverted commas, but it has to be done occasionally, by Viking traders and raiders over the years. Caithness has, as I said before in a previous podcast, a lot of names which are linked to Old Norse terms. Because of that, there has been a great interest in local Caithness archaeology, and there is a local Caithness archaeological trust set up. I'll stick one of their web pages in around about here somewhere, and I'll pop the URL in the bottom. Please go visit their website. There's some information with events that they're planning up until 2017. They're a local group who do a lot of work encouraging folk to investigate the archaeology of Caithness. It's an intriguing place, from cairns to brochs. We have a massive amount of castles, ruined castles, sites of Pictish settlements, all of which I find fascinating. I find the history that goes along with things like this quite intriguing. And getting the chance to walk and stand in these sites and just think how long ago they were being lived in, and the sort of things, ordinary everyday things that people were doing at that point in time is absolutely wonderful. So I had planned a wander out with the camera to take a pile of photographs and maybe some video clips of what I found. as I went to visit local archaeological sites. But over the last couple of weeks I've been so incredibly busy with other family administration type things, I just haven't got round to it. So I will get to it eventually, and some photographs will follow. In the meantime, I've been asked to find some information, or to show some information on my local port here at Scrabster, which is a few hundred yards from where I live. And I'll nip down to Scrabster and we'll get some footage from there, and we'll pop it into the next podcast. It's a lovely little harbour. We have one or two large vessels come in there quite regularly, and I think it might make a nice start to exploring Caithness. So that's my local area. Works in progress. Pardon me. He says, burping again. There are several works in progress. As always, you know I'm not a single project person. I always have multiple projects on the go and dip between them as I feel like it. I'm a sucker for a good knit along, I have discovered. And as you begin one, other ideas pop into your head when you think about knitwear design as well as production, and lo and behold, I get carried away. So, at the moment, you might remember that in my stash enhancement from Perth Festival of Yarn and the Loch Ness Festival of Yarn, there was some yarn, some lamb's wool from JC Rennie. That lamb's wool has gone into the strand along knit along created by Nathan Taylor, sock knitician, and I decided on a design for a hat, and here is the said hat. It's a 6-panel Aran inspired stranded hat. So there are, and I don't know how well they're coming out in this light, 2 panels per side on my DPNs. At the moment there's some honeycomb and a bit of stranded work and another little interlacing loop. There's some stranded rib and some striping, which will eventually, he says, folding it up, will eventually fold up to make the bottom brim of the hat, which I'm quite happy with. I think it's going to come out looking quite pleasant. I see that the sun has just hit one of the blinds, so try coming back there, gives a slightly better light. I'll put some photographs of the hat in as well. The lamb's wool is knitting up beautifully. The 2-colour stranded work was a bit of an experiment. I wanted to see how it would work out. I wasn't sure if it would show if the contrast would be strong enough, but with the 2 colours that I've chosen, the grey and the pistachio, the grey actually has a hint of the pistachio in it, and they work really, really well together. Is it going to be too feminine a hat or too masculine a hat? It's not going to be overly masculine. Is it going to be too feminine? I don't think so. But we'll wait and see when it's finished. It's due to be finished for the end of this week for the strand along. The inside of the hat is coming along and looking really, really quite nice. I have to say, my floats aren't as bad as I thought they were going to be. I'm really quite happy with them. And it's going to make for a particularly cosy finished object. So I'm delighted with that. The yarns themselves, as I'm working with them, I have to say, they are really quite soft, they're quite squishy, they're quite pleasant, and as 4-ply lamb's wool goes, and I'm expecting that when this washes, it's going to develop one of those blooms which I've seen with other yarns, which is absolutely fantastic. So that was one. Where did that take me? Well, that put me into strand along heaven, and I thought, well, what else can I do? He said, sitting back and getting back into the light. I had finished some other objects that you'll see in a couple of minutes, and I thought, fingerless mitts. I've done a couple of pairs of fingerless mitts recently. They might make nice Christmas presents. I've got an idea for another pair, and it involved some stranded work. So out with the ancient DPNs. For anyone who remembers my box of needles, this is a set of my grandmother's anodised aluminium coloured needles from the 1960s, and I've thrown them on here, and we have this set of stranded 4-ply fingerless mitt coming together. 2 wools involved. The remnants of the blue 4-ply lamb's wool that I used for the baby Aaron for the friend in Glasgow a month or so ago, and Lang's Yavol Magic 4-ply sock yarn. The colours in this just appealed to me so much that I couldn't resist combining it with the blue to see how it would look, and the dark greens and the blue are working really, really well together. But rather than the pattern all running in one direction, I thought let's change the direction of the pattern and one panel and make that the front. And I decided that we would have an afterthought thumb. So if you look at that side, you'll find a lovely piece of red thread. And that red is 10 stitches that I've knitted in, which when it's unpicked will give me the stitches I want to knit up the thumb. And we'll see how the afterthought thumb goes. It's not the method I normally use when I'm making mitts, but hey, it's got to be worth a try. So that's that one. Thoroughly enjoying it. Now, well, we're back after a minor interruption where Beardychiel had forgotten to delete scenes from the previous recording and ended up with full memory card. What an old prat. As I was saying, the works in progress are moving on apace. I had visited Yarn Cake earlier in the summer, as you'll remember, and picked up some yarn at that point in time and started another project because I am participating in Eva Christie's Podcaster's Sock Christmas Swap. So out comes one ball of incredibly in-your-face yarn, and the label here, it is a Crazy Zauberball made in Germany. It's by Schopel. I'm afraid I don't read German that well, but it's 75% superwash wool and 25% polyamide, which is nylon. It's nice to work with. The colours are absolutely fantastic. It's knitting up beautifully. Toe-up sock coming on nicely here, and a slightly different texture added to this German short row heel, which I'm going to describe for you as what I'm going to call a waffle heel. And what I've done to create the extra thickness in the heel, to give it that little bit of extra wear, rather than a slip stitch heel, I've used a mock fisherman's rib, but alternated the position row by row by row of where the yarn overs are being created for it, and it's created a really thick, puffy, waffled section heel, which I'm really quite pleased with. Just moved on to the upper part of the sock. We'll see how it goes. I know who I'm knitting for, and I'm saying absolutely nothing. When it arrives, I've put a little bit of simple lace work on the front just to give it a little something to go. I think I might be the only male podcaster involved, so fortunately I could be knitting for any one of a number of young ladies. I use the term young ladies as a term of endearment. Please don't pull me up for being politically incorrect. I just think of all of my podcasting friends as lovely young ladies, and myself as a crabbit twisted carnaptious old guy. So this has been lovely to knit. This was my sock project this weekend, or rather my sock knitting in the car project this weekend, which I have thoroughly enjoyed, and I'll tell you about this weekend's adventure a little bit later. So, Zauber ball, sock yarn, absolutely super colours. The range of colours that are coming out in this are, they're just mind-blowingly wonderful. I'm thoroughly enjoying them. Hope to get that finished soon, and you would notice that when it came out of the bag, my needles were being protected by my lovely little needle Cosy. Now, my needle Cosy is quite famous, and the fame of my needle Cosy will be revealed. Anybody who watches other Scottish podcasts might know what's coming next, but I'm saving my little bit of podcasting information for later in this one. So that's the last of my works in progress, which I've had recent work added to them, and that takes me on to my finished objects. Well, in finished objects there are 4 finished objects in the last couple of weeks. There are still works in progress. There's still a shawl in progress. There's still a cowl, strand-along cowl in progress that I had decided to work on in cotton, and I had sort of gone off. I wasn't enjoying it. It was a piece of double knitting. I chose a project that was too big and too complex for me for that stage of my double knitting experience, and I'm tempted to rip it out and start again, because when I go back and look at it, I'm not happy with the shape, I'm not happy with the quality of the finish, and I just can't finish it. As it is, I don't think it's acceptable. It's not a quality I want to put my name to. Therefore, it will be ripped out. And yes, I know that people on the other side of that big pond, known as the Atlantic, call it frogging. But no, I don't frog, I rip things out. I'm an old Scots knitter. So, finished objects. Where are we with finished objects? Well, first of all, last podcast you saw me talking to Kirsty Gunn, who was sitting spinning. Forgive me while we were chatting. I have a throat like, I don't know, the bottom of a camel's hoof. Dry, sandy. Kirsty was spinning away, and she was talking to me about having spun some Zvorbel fleece that she'd been given by an aunt, and she left me a skein, 100 and a bit grams to play with. And it was spun round about, it was a single somewhere between Aran and chunky in places, down as fine as 4-ply or fingering in bits, because it was one of her early spinning projects. And she said, do what you can with it. It had been washed once, lightly carded before it was spun. So I gave it a couple of soaks, a couple of washes. I hung it out and let the air get about it, and took some more of the lanolin out. Took some of the grit and grime generally out of the fleece, and as it washed up, it felt absolutely lovely. A little bit of bite, anybody who's into their tickly or jaggy wool feeling, yeah, it does have a little bit of a guard hair bite to it, but it's not the end of the world. And I thought, well, there's not enough to do anything major with it, let's turn it into a hat. Is there enough, if I knit it as chunky, to get an entire hat? I didn't think there was, but I did think, well, treat it as Aran rather than chunky because of the range of thicknesses that's there. And I remembered that I had some Drops Big Delight multicoloured stuff left from earlier in the year, so I put the two together, and the chocolate brown and black of the Zvorbels with the Drops Big Delight have produced this lovely creature. I knitted it as a sort of waffly patterned hat, and it's a baggy, pom-pommed, cosy, finished hat. And I have to say, it's really comfy to wear. I did have it on the first night that it turned fairly nippy, and it was absolutely fine. What I do find is I've knitted it just slightly wider than I need to in the rib. So I'm thinking that some shirring elastic rattled through the inside of the rib will pull it in just enough for me to think it's not going to be taken off by a strong breeze. But I like the fact that it's baggy and a bit slouchy. I don't wear a lot of slouchy hats, but on this one, it's right. It just seems to work. And I have to say, I like the little bits of purple and green along with the black. It feels quite good. So, Kirsty Gunn, your Vorbal's knitted up beautifully. You said you've got 3 or 4 fleeces of it put away. Keep spinning, missus, because there is a future for that yarn. Whether or not we could over dye the black to add a hint of something else to it, I don't know, but it has potential. I could see this becoming a large lace Arden weight shawl. Something really big and really super cosy for the winter. Something which anybody would be happy to throw around their shoulders or drape over their knees if they were having a night where they felt there was a slight draft, because it's nice. It is really, really nice. So that's finished object number 1. Finished object number 2 is a set of fingerless mitts. Now, those of you who follow me on Instagram would have seen these develop. These are knitted in the Perth Festival of Yarn commemorative yarn from David Rates, also known as This Boy, and they are double knitting, 75-25 wool and polyamide, a dye colourway which is the Perth Festival of Yarn commemorative, and it won't be available in a lot of other places. There was only, I think, about 500 or 600 grams of it, and I got 100 grams and I brought it home, and it has become a pair of fingerless mitts, the backs of which, forgive me for standing up, but I love the pattern on the back. I think it's worked out rather well. I quite enjoy it. I find it quite cosy. I think it's maybe a tad more feminine than I would want to wear on a regular basis. I have shown it to a couple of other friends who have all thought they really, really liked it. Whether I use them as a Christmas present, I don't know yet. But the pattern will become available. Oh, but it's not finished, because you can't have something like that without repeating the pattern in a hat. Now, putting the whole lot together, I ran out of yarn and I needed a brim. So what did I do? Well, I decided it was time to add a little something, and what I had to hand that was a colour that suited happened to be some drops alpaca. Really, really soft, really quite fluffy, and I know I look a sight. Vibrant green and grey, but the hat is wonderful. It's super cosy on. My wife seems to think that this is the best way I could possibly wear it. She said the more of my face that it covers, the better. But she also said that in that particular position, pulled down like a beanie, with the brim folded in half, it actually makes a really nice beanie style hat. So either configuration works for me. I don't mind. I just like having something that keeps the wind out of my ears, because in Caithness, when the wind gets a hold of you, it can be pretty bloomin' chilly. I'm going to take these mitts off before I stretch them, because if I do want to use them as a Christmas present for someone, I don't want them out of shape. You'll notice that they seem to flare out at the end, at the open end. And I'm always wary with things like that they get to be overly tight. So there's a sort of double knitted cast off, loose cast off that I've come across, which I really like for things like that, which rely on any ribbing before holding holding them in place, rather than you getting, as Billy Connolly once described it, the ring of nae confidence, where something's been tight holding itself on. So, Fingerless Mess, courtesy of David Rakes, this boy, beautiful colourway, lovely soft yarn, David, absolutely stunning to work with, nice to knit, thoroughly enjoyed it. So that's that as a finished object. The woolly hat, David Rakes, top half, drops alpaca, cosy and fluffy around the ears. Couldn't ask for any more. This, I don't mind being loud. I've often been called loud, and quite often loud and objectionable. I don't really care. It's comfy, it's cosy, it's mine. So, the hat that goes with the mix. Oh! And there's one more. Again, when I was away, Perth Festival of Yarn, stash enhancement. I saw yarn by Rosedine Rylands, which felt wonderful, and I brought one 100 gram ball back with me, and it's in this natural brown. And you'd know from the last podcast that I had been working on a double knitting headband for my daughter. She loves things like that for the winter. She's not a fan of hats, but having a woolly headband to cover her ears, she absolutely adores. So I did some work on an Aran style woolly headband. It's going to be fine for Sarah. It's just an inch or so short if it were for me. But I've left the centre completely plain and open because I have a cunning plan for that. This is a design in development, and I'm going to pass that on to a friend and leave it with them for the next bit. And you're going to have to watch this space to see what happens with it, because it's going to be quite exciting. I'm really looking forward to how that particular headband develops. So this is Rosedine Rylands. It's 100% wool, it's Scots yarn. I can't say any more about it other than the fact that it's cosy. It doesn't have too much of an itchy bite to it, which I know some people dislike, but nice to knit with. About half a ball in that project so far. I think I'm going to be doing another one with a slightly different pattern for her as well, but I'm sure Sarah, my daughter, will be absolutely delighted. And that finishes my completed objects for the time being. So what else have I been up to? Well, this last weekend has been a weekend away from home. I've been waiting for this weekend to come since March. On the 31st of March this year, it was my birthday, and my children handed me an envelope as a birthday present, and I thought, oh, what have they been up to? And when I opened it, I was absolutely delighted to find 2 tickets for last Friday to go and see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the musical, live in Glasgow at the King's Theatre. Now, I love going to the King's Theatre. It's a lovely old building. It's a theatre which I associate with my childhood, with pantomime, with musicals over the years, with some absolutely wonderful family memories. So going there is always nice. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as a stage musical is something I had read about and something which I've wanted to see for a long time, and my kids blew me away by giving me this present because they got me the best seats in the house. My wife and I sat right in the middle of the stalls, centre stage seats, and had the most amazing view of the show. What can I say? A cast which I would not have expected. Caractacus Potts being played by Jason Manford. Phil Duputus as the Baron. Claire Sweeney as the Baroness. Yes, I could see that. She's a well-known actress. Just a wonderful cast, a great production, super choreography, wonderful music. The band themselves on the night played a blinder. And the singing voices of the stand-up comedians really surprised me. We don't always think of these people as multitasking, but holy moly, they blew me out of the water. Jason Manford's voice really surpassed what I expected of him. Nice control. I love a musical. I've sung in a lot of musicals over the years as an amateur, and I appreciate a stunning performance when I hear one. So well done to that man on that night. Absolutely nailed the performance. So that was wonderful. A great trip. Was it the highlight of the weekend? Yes, it was. What came second? Well, the trip to IKEA that my wife planned didn't come second. It came about fourth or fifth down the line. The IKEA store at Braehead in Glasgow is gigantic. It's a one heck of a walk around. And I said to her, there's no way I'm going to manage that. And she said, well, just do what you can and then head back to the car. So we had taken mother-in-law in her wheelchair. And I was thinking, you know something, if I'd left her in the car and I was in the wheelchair, this might have been easier. But we went in and we walked 50 metres. I found a seat, tested it for a few minutes. We walked the next 50 metres. I found another seat, tested it for a few minutes. And after 2 or 3 stints like this, we decided it was time to call it a day. We headed back out again. Having stopped for the customary IKEA coffee shop and restaurant quick lunch, you kind of really go in with a small plate of meatballs and lingonberry and some gravy and some mashed potatoes or some chips or whatever. I can't help it. The food is gimmicky but nice. If you're looking for a junk food lunch, it filled a hole. It was absolutely fine. We headed downstairs. Janet had picked out 1 or 2 things that might be useful for the house, and in order to get to that section of the store we had to walk another 100 metres or so. And that involved going through my favourite part of IKEA, which is kitchenware. I am a cooking fanatic. I love to cook. I have chefed professionally in the past, and there's nothing I love more than being in amongst pots and pans, knives, gadgets. Oh, it's lovely. Absolutely wonderful. I volunteered to bypass it. I just couldn't take it. We got through a side door, straight through to the checkout section. Janet picked up the 1 or 2 things that she wanted, and we got straight back out to the car in a seat. As we were picking things up, having done that couple of 100 metres, I stopped to try and pick up a box, and I couldn't even pick up a simple box in IKEA. I'd used my energy allocation for the afternoon. And I should have known better. But hey, we all learn by our mistakes. So IKEA, not the best part of the weekend. But number 2 on the weekend was before the show on Friday. Friday morning, I had arranged to take a trip to the south side of Glasgow to an area called Johnston to meet up with a Scottish podcaster who hadn't been at Perth. Unfortunately, she had a prior commitment and she couldn't be in Perth, so Helen Duffin, known online as Sprite966, had missed the Perth Festival of Yarn. And since I was going to Glasgow, I'd been speaking to her online. I said, look, I'm coming to Glasgow and I have some free time. Do you fancy a quick catch up and just say hello? And Helen said, yeah, let's do it. And we arranged a place and a time. And I caught up with her in her local yarn store, Knickknacks, in Johnson. Now, the store's owned by her friend Pamela, and Pamela made me feel absolutely at home and incredibly welcome. And Pamela, I thank you wholeheartedly for that. It was a lovely morning. In fact, I arrived there at about 11, and if you watch Helen's podcast, she describes the meeting. We were meeting for half an hour to have a chat, and we were there from 11 till 3 through numerous cups of tea supplied by the kind Pamela. And again, Pamela, thank you so much. I did do some yarn shopping while I was there. Not all for myself, I might add. I had shopping instructions from Janet, my other half, who has fallen for knitting pom-pom blankets. You may have seen them and the pom-pom yarn that goes with them. And she said, if there is any, I'm looking for. So, not single colours. I found some. Photographs will appear. I bought some with advice from Helen and Pamela on what colours looked quite good, and the choice was approved of when I got back. But we had a stunning 4 hours sitting, little bits of knitting, talking about things like sock heels. What do we like and what don't we like in sock heels? Helen's a heel flapping gusset person, I'm a German short row person. Neither of us, we discussed just about every version of a sock heel that you might possibly come up with. We talked about yarns that we like, yarns that we don't like, yarn shop surprises. We talked about the Perth Festival of Yarn. We swapped life stories. We swapped bits of family story. And you know something, at the end of it, I felt as if I'd known Helen and Pamela for years. They just made the whole process so comfortable. So thanks to both of you. Helen, it was wonderful. Pamela, it was fantastic. Now, one of the things that we were talking about was regional accents. And both Helen and I get comments from our viewers because of our Scots accents. And Helen has a slightly broader Glaswegian accent than I have, which I love. I think her accent is absolutely fantastic. It reminds me so much of being at home in Glasgow. So I'm slightly biased from that perspective. But we did discuss it, and we wondered just how far our accents could go before we were actually needing subtitles for our viewers. Yeah, there's an interesting prospect. So, I said in the next podcast we will put in a wee experiment. So, Helen Hen, Gonnie sees a copy of your address so I can send you one or two wee things I've got put away for you. No translation will be provided for that. Right? Helen, get yourself together, get online, send us the postal information. And back to the script. What else has happened? We did that. Sunday, Janet and I said farewell to our mum and started our journey back up the road. It was a whirlwind visit. I had wanted to catch up with piles of people while we were there. I wanted to catch up with my brother. I wanted to catch up with my mate Angus, whose grandchild I had been knitting for. I did manage to catch up with Helen briefly on the Friday. But time went so quickly. And Janet's mum's health is not at its best. We decided to cut a lot of the other things and spend as much time as possible with Gran Archer. And it was really nice to just be sitting, knitting and chatting away to her. I'm hoping that we'll get the chance to come south again in the not too distant future, and hopefully catch up with some of the folk we missed this time. So if any of you are watching, my apologies guys for not getting to you this time. We will catch up, it just may take slightly longer than we had anticipated. Well, what else? Well, there was a yarn acquisition. As I said, I picked up a couple of balls of pom-pom yarn for Janet, and in the process of walking through knickknacks, there were a pile of knitted samples that Pamela had put together with different yarns, and I came across some cotton, and it just screamed out to me, buy me, buy me. Picked 3 colours, 2 blues and a grey, and they're speckled, they're mottled, they're lovely. And what am I going to do with them? They're going to become a tiny version of an old Icelandic yoked sweater for one of my grandkids. I don't know whether it's going to be for Leo or whether it's going to be for Ruben, because it's a smaller size that I'm thinking about. But it's in cotton, and I'm not going to show you until it's finished. So you're just going to have to wait. And that was my yarn acquisition. So what else has happened? Well, funnily enough, Glen Family Knitting has made it into the press. But not me. Janet, my wife, has ended up having some of her knitting mentioned in an article in the local press. One of her friends, Susan MacDonald, decided that she would help raise money for the National Children's Home's NCH Action for Kids by volunteering to sleep rough in Edinburgh for a night, raising some sponsorship and donating to charity. In preparing for that, Janet decided to support her by knitting her a hat and gloves, specifically some fingerless gloves and a hat for that night to help keep out the cold. And Susan took them off, went to Edinburgh, slept out for a night. The money that she had raised through sponsorship here in Caithness, she donated to NCH, and good on you, Susan, for doing that. Anybody that's raising money for kids' charities, thumbs up to you. But she came back and gave an article to the local press and mentioned the hat and gloves that Janet had knitted her. So there's my darling wife's name and print for her knitting abilities. And she does not acknowledge that she's a good knitter, but I know she is. She knits a lot of hats, premie hats and things for sending to hospitals. And she doesn't blow her own trumpet. So Janet, well done. I'll say it. And if you moan at me for mentioning you in the podcast, hard luck. And that's that bit done. Now, in the last podcast, I was talking about this. And this was the mohair and silk giveaway that I set up in the last podcast. And people had to give us 4 pieces of information about how they would use this on the Beardychiel's Knitting Banter Ravelry group. And a group of people did. I asked my fellow Scottish podcasters each to cast a vote for the project they thought most deserved the 200 grams of yarn. They did, and before all of the votes were in, there was an overall winner that even with 1 vote still to come in, could not be beaten. In fact, with 2 votes still to come in, because I still haven't cast a vote myself, and I don't need to, because that is a clear winner. And that clear winner is Riot Hill, Riottihill, who is Wen from Minden in Ontario in Canada. So Wen, I will PM you and I will say send me your details, and I will package up 200 grams of yarn and send it off to Canada, and wish you every luck in knitting the project that you proposed, because I have to say, I'm keen to see how the finished object might eventually look. And if you're kind enough to send us a photograph of that finished object, I will put it up here in the podcast and I will celebrate your success. So well done. And many, many thanks to all of my Scottish podcasting friends for helping to do the judging. Well, that's it. Summary time. This is a slightly shorter one than normal. What have I been up to since the last time we met? I have, as always, been watching some podcasts, and I've watched the ones that I always watch. I've watched all my Scottish podcasting buddies. I've watched some stuff from Nathan Taylor's Petition. I've watched the Bakery Bears, but I've been watching some new ones as well. I like to dip in occasionally, and you occasionally find one that you think, oh, that's interesting, I'll have a wee look and see what they have to offer. And you might not always go back to them or subscribe to them regularly, but you might dip in occasionally. And I know as a podcaster, those of us who do things like that are a pain in the tonsils, because we all want subscribers, we all want to know, we all want the love. You know, tell me you're enjoying it, am I wasting my time? Well, this is a message to two folk to say you're not wasting your time, because I've thoroughly enjoyed watching you. The first one is Yarn Hoarder, who's only just started 2 or 3 podcasts. I saw her being interviewed on another podcast, and I thought, oh, that wall of yarn behind you looks incredibly interesting. I'm going to have a look and see if your name appears anywhere. Lo and behold, her first podcast was just up. So I watched it, thoroughly enjoyed it. Then she'd been at the Rhinebeck Yarn Festival in the States and did a little podcast from there. And I watched that and I thought, yeah, there's potential here. I could enjoy this in the future. So we'll see how that one develops. And another one from this side of the pond came up as a recommendation on YouTube, saying, recommended for you, you should consider watching Crafts from the Third Floor. Now again, relatively new, I think only 6 or 7 episodes out there, a bit like myself, and I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed what I was seeing. Obviously, an extremely experienced knitter, a wide range of things that there's an interest in. Knitting for the family, knitting for friends, a bit of commercial knitting, some design work as well, obvious, and some yarn dyeing and things. Absolutely super. Really, really interesting to watch. Some really nice combination of yarns planned for going into projects. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Nice and easy to chill out to while I'm sitting knitting or doing something else. So yeah, that's how my last couple of weeks have gone. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I've had a wonderful time. As I say, school holidays have been on here, and I've had some wonderful granddad time with Ian. I haven't had as much time with Ruben and Leo as I would have liked, but I'm going to try and make up for that later this week. And that's everything for now, ladies and gents. Please keep watching. Please keep knitting. If I've said anything that you think you want to comment on, please leave a comment, get in touch. I'd be delighted to hear from you. I haven't put anything in vintage patterns this time because I haven't actually prepared anything, but I will have a vintage pattern for us in our next meeting. So until then, keep happy, keep knitting. Cheerio. P.S. Before I forget, my needle Cosy. It was a present from Helen, Sprite 966. I got there, and when we had our meeting, I had a little something in my bag for her, and I had something else which I had forgotten and left at home, hence the reason for asking for the address, because I want to pop it in the poster. But she'd handed me this absolutely stunning little needle Cosy. And it's a brilliant idea. Stops your stitches from dropping off your needles, stops the needles from poking through the side of your bag. Absolutely wonderful. She makes them. And inside is the lovely little handmade by Sprite 966 label, which is wonderful. I think they're absolutely brilliant, and she's generally in the habit of giving them away. And I've a funny feeling, Helen, there could be a small cottage industry there if you were interested, because much as you might decry your sewing, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Mine is lovely and it's beautifully finished, and I think it's something I would probably want to buy. If I was working with my big long DPNs, I have to wonder, is there a Cosy size that would fit them? I don't know how long they are. I'll need to measure them and maybe drop you a wee note and put a begging bit in it. Dear Helen, can you please make a gigantic Cosy for my big DPNs? But this little 6-inch one is absolutely wonderful. End of PS. Thanks very much. Cheery bye.